Good morning. Chapter 27, Chapter 28 are going to probably be a little bit quicker than normal. There's the last two chapters in the whole entirety of our course material. One thing to understand, if you have not got your book essay done about the Cold War, it is due Monday. And make sure you have it turned into the churn in on the classroom. I will not take it if it is shared or emailed to me. Everyone has access to that Dropbox and it's clearly marked. Make sure you get that in there. I've had a hiatus since my last lecture just because of things. I gave you a lot more time to focus on your book essay. But I'm going to start chapter 27. Chapter 27 will run from really today to the end of next week. I know we got Good Friday next Friday. And I'm going to put in the chapter 27 quiz and reaction quiz up early. I haven't looked at chapter 27 reaction quiz, so we might have some wiggle room there, but chapter 27 quiz will be posted by next Thursday, like normal. Okay, the post-Cold War, important note, we're going to look at the Bush and Clinton transform Americans' role, economic resurgence of the 90s, my favorite time for the 90s, unless you are Aunt Becky, that is not so good right now. What culture conflicts emerged in the 90s, and how did a sense of political partnership affect the election of 2000? Hanging Chads, anyone? And then September 11th. This video looks like it doesn't work right now. I'm going to go back and look at it. But at the end of last chapter 26, the last time we talked about the election of 1988, there was a sudden shift in the world in 1989. What you're going to see is the collapse of East Berlin. The Berlin Wall, by mistake, will be taken down. Basically, Gorbachev and his reforms had loosened up a lot of the the Soviet Union's hold on Eastern European countries. But essentially, someone put in that word out that there was no guards at the wall, and they basically just let people come to the wall and start tearing it down. That's basically what it came to. And they didn't stop it. Gorbachev elected not to send troops in, which on his part was a critical move and a very bold move. Though it was at his cost and later the collapse of the Soviet Union, this signaled that the East was finally starting to crumble with their totalitarian governments. And these images that you see on the board and on the slide really transpire into an amazing transformation with the wall now crumbling down. So, after that, and then a couple years later, the collapse of the Soviet Union itself, we are now in a dramatic world in which American predominance promised to redefine the country's global role. We're the new superpower. The Soviet Union is now in ruins and collapse and replaced by now with the Federal Republic of Russia. So what's the new world order? Bush's first major foreign policy action was throw back the days of American intervention in the Western Hemisphere. We're going to focus more on American things going on. So that's going to be Panama. Overthrow of Manuel Antonio Noriega had become involved in the international drug trade. Basically, the Panama Canal, which we had built and we're still influencing here, we were worried about this drug trafficker controlling the canal. So we go in and overthrow him. It's a quick operation. It doesn't last very long. And we assert our dominance there. Now, the biggest thing that President Bush is going to deal with is the Gulf War. In 1990, Iraq invaded and annexed Kuwait, an oil-rich sheikdom or sheik country on the Persian Gulf. Going back to the 80s, Iraq had warred against Iran. We actually supported Iraq in the 80s. The enemy of the enemy is my friend mentality. But by 1990, Saddam Hussein, who's strongly in power in Iraq, invades Kuwait. Kuwait, I mean, it's a former country or territory of Iraq and all this. But he was after the oil fields. Kuwait is a very rich country. And they had immense oil reserves. Fearing Iraqi invasion of Saudi Arabia, a longtime ally and major oil provider of the United States, Bush rushed troops to the Middle East. He created a large coalition of forces, went before the UN. In 1991, at the behest of the UN and at the request of Saudi Arabia and the occupied country Kuwait, the United States launched Operation Desert Storm, which quickly drove the Iraqi army from Kuwait. This was the U.S.'s first major involvement since Vietnam. We really did not know how our military would fare in this operation. The United Nations ordered Hussein to disarm and impose economic sanctions. He remained in power, though. A large American military establishment remained in Saudi Arabia. This, though, will outrage Islamic fundamentalists in the region. In short, the Iraq War We kick butt. This is the military that Reagan built. We kick the Nash out of the Iraqi army, the fourth largest army in the world at the time. We did not know how it would go. Our tanks, our aircraft, our troops, everything goes mostly very well. There's a few minor hiccups, obviously, with any war, but this shows the world that the American military is the premier military, and we are not to be reckoned with. Saddam is forced back, and honestly, President George Bush could have taken U.S. forces all the way to Baghdad and removed Saddam. He'd have been justified doing so, but he chose ultimately to limit his gains to liberating Kuwait, which we could critique later on. That was the right. We should have did more, but he did everything he said. His popularity will soar to 80s, 90% during this period. It looked like re-election at this point was all but assured for President Bush. Visions of Americans' role. President Bush identified the Gulf War as the first step in a struggle to create a world where we could have democracy promoted and global free trade. Colin Powell predicted that the post-Cold War would be a dangerous environment with conflicts popping up in unexpected places. Rest of the 90s role, we were not certain what our role was. After the Gulf War, the 90s is going to be kind of murky. What are we supposed to do? We are the sole superpower now. Russia is now, in shambles. China is anything but a superpower yet. But what's going to happen is and here's a picture up there looking at the Gulf War, American military jets, the F-15E and F-16 Fighting Falcon, I believe, up there, flying over the oil fields of Kuwait. This shows America's dominance. We control the air as well as the ground. If you look at this map as well, going through the operation, we do a series of operations throughout along the border. Actually, a major tank battle as well. But this is all relatively quick. A couple weeks and the war is over. Now, Bush is riding a high. But then comes the election of '92 and the elections of Clinton. Had the election been held in 1991, Bush would have been victorious. It wouldn't have been even close. Later in 1991, after the build-up to war, the economy slipped into not a major recession, but a minor recession. The economy slowed. Bill Clinton won the Democratic nomination by combining social liberalism, abortion rights, gay rights, and affirmative action, and pledging to reduce government bureaucracy and promise to end welfare as we know it, which that did not happen. Clinton was a charismatic campaigner. He was actually a moderate. He was a middle ground. He had elements of a Republican and elements of a Democrat. Slogan above headquarters said, "It's the economy, stupid," and he realized Bush was this great American politician, great war record, a war hero, had the resume. He was a good person. But Bush was failing to realize what people were now seeing was the economy had slowed. Bush seemed out of touch with day-to-day lives of ordinary Americans. Ross Perot entered the race as an alternative to both parties, saying that neither candidate was worthy to be president. Clinton won with only 42% of the popular vote. Clinton did not come in as this, oh my gosh, everyone loves Clinton mentality, but a commanding electoral vote. Perot carried 19% of the vote. Probably 3/4 of the Perot vote would have went to Bush. And if Perot's not the election, Bush wins the election. There's not much debate about that. So Perot fundamentally shifts the perspective of this election. And it's a major upset. If you look at the presidential election of Perot, Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot, Bush was the heavy favorite. But somehow Clinton manages to win this. And it's mostly due to Perot. Now, there's a famous incident. I don't know if I have a photo of it up here. I know I have it in my American history class. Is during a debate, everyone monitors the debate, right? If you ever see a debate going on, if you do a little sippy little drink, how you walk, how you talk, how you fidget, they micromanage it, right? They examine it. During the debate with Bill Clinton and Ross Perot, this is what Bush kept doing. He kept looking at his watch. And that was a horrible debate tactic, though he wasn't thinking about it, because everyone said he doesn't have time to be here. He doesn't care. They tore him apart on it. And if you look at the Electoral College, Clinton wins 370 of the Electoral College. But if you look at the popular vote, it's actually quite close. You take out the 20 million votes because Clinton won by what, 6 million votes? You take out the 20 million votes that Perot had, I think 3/4 of those go to Perot or go to Bush, because Perot was heavily conservative. He was anything but a Democrat. So you see the fundamental shift here, right? It's a huge hit on Bush. Clinton in office appointed several blacks and women to his cabinet. The first female Attorney General, Janet Reno. He's going to put abortion supporters on the Supreme Court. Ginsburg, who is still there, and Breyer. I believe Breyer is retired, or he might still be there. The Army is going to pass a policy called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was a piecemeal agreement. He ran on the principle of basically expanding gay rights. Basically what Don't Ask, Don't Tell did was you could be gay in the military, but you didn't talk about it. People could know about it, but you didn't advertise it, and what you did in your private time is what you did in your private time. That has since been repealed, and full integration of that has come about now. That's separate from transgenderism. They're not the same entity. There is still a ban on transgenderism in the military right now, and the Supreme Court thus far, or the Court of Appeals, has upheld that ban based on a couple different reasons. But point of this is he ran on that. Income, this one I actually really like, earned income tax credit. Basically, if you have children, you get a tax credit. Some reason why a lot of people have like 20 kids, it seems like, is you get up to $1,400, $1,500 per kid. I think they actually upped it to $2,000 not too long ago, or last cycle that was. But the point of it is you get a credit for how many kids you have. He creates the North American Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which has been up for the debate here in recent months with President Trump. They've been renegotiating that with a proposal to basically update NAFTA with Mexico and Canada. Basically, we have free trade, no tariffs. Now, one that's very hotly brought up all the time in class even, his wife, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, was appointed to lead a movement to create a universal health care. It failed miserably. It was attacked by many, by both sides. Hillary is a controversial person in general, and it was a disaster. Just so you know, Hillary goes by Hillary Clinton now. She has dropped her maiden name. She used to be called Hillary Rodham Clinton, and that was her maiden name, Hillary Rodham. But now, when she ran for president in 2008 or 12, she dropped it finally, fully, and just goes by Hillary Clinton. Freedom Revolution, economy was recovering slowly. Voters turned against Clinton, and Republicans won back both houses since the first time since the 1950s. So in 94, Clinton had to basically work with a Republican-controlled Congress. Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. He had what they call Contract of America. Promised to curtail scope of the government, cut taxes and regulations, all the stuff that Republicans still run on to this day. In 1995, government shut down. Most Americans blamed Congress, and Congress soon retreated. It was a 27-day shutdown, I believe. It was the longest up until the recent one. Clinton's political strategy. Campaigned against a radical Congress. In the State of the Union of 1996, the era of big government is over, he stated. Turned his back on the tradition of Democratic Party liberalism, embraced the anti-government outlook associated with Republicans. Clinton easily beats a very boring candidate in Bob Dole in 96. He accepted many of the premises of his opponents, and he was hard to beat as far as that goes about. Now, one thing that the book fails to talk about, and I think it's very ironic, and I think paints a perspective of who wrote the book, that if you look at this class, there is no mention of the 1993 incident in Somalia in the book. If you look in history, and being a military veteran myself, in 1993, Clinton mishandled, in my opinion, and in many, a catastrophic event in Somalia. Somalia's basically government had completely collapsed. The UN was there, warlords were intervening, but U.S. troops were sent in to help stabilize, along with UN. They were not this on their coat; they were part of the UN. This is where you get the famous incident Black Hawk Down. After Black Hawk Down and American troops that were killed, Clinton basically pulled us out altogether and had nothing to go in. It was a pretty bad foreign policy decision. But there's no mention of it in the book, which I think is kind of ironic. It's a book, if you haven't figured anything about the book loves Clinton. There is very few much elements about critiquing him. A lot of the stuff they bring up are valid, but they don't go into a lot of the other nuances of Clinton at all, which I think is interesting. Now, Clinton and the world afterwards, like Jimmy Carter, took steps to encourage the settlement of long-standing international conflicts. They had mixed results on this. The Rwandan genocide, United States did nothing when Rwanda had a massive genocide. Failed efforts in Somalia, book leaves this out, as I just mentioned, Black Hawk Down. Very good movie, by the way, if you have not seen it. Balkan crisis, disintegration of the former communist country of Yugoslavia led to ethnic conflict. Ethnic cleansing will become a word here. Thousands will die. Yugoslavian troops and local Serbs conducted ethnic cleansing against the Albanian population of Kosovo, a province of Serbia then. This is all in the Balkan region. So essentially what you have is Yugoslavia was a country. It dissolved in the 90s. Separate states emerged, areas such as Serbia, Kosovo, Croatia, Slovakia, and all this, and Albania. And what happens is, I don't like your group doesn't like me, I'm going to kill you. Is essentially what happens. NATO was launched, a 2-month war in 1999 against Yugoslavia that led the deployment of American troops to Kosovo. And then we are still there today. You ever hear about the Balkan or Kosovo mission? That is where they are at. Human rights now are a center in the 90s, played an important role in this international affair. The United States dispatched the military to distant parts of the world to assist in international conflicts. Got a couple more, one more section we'll do here today and we'll be done. Globalization and discontents. Globalization, the process by which people invest, goods, information, grew increasingly throughout this decade in the 90s and under Clinton. Basically, with the rise of the internet that comes about and the collapse of communism, this opened up the entire world to the spread of market capitalism and a whole new slew of economic opportunities. So the computer revolution. Microchips made it possible for the development of entirely new products. Video cassettes, handheld video games, cell phones, digital cameras, mass media were all now affordable. The computer transformed American life. The internet, Al Gore did not invent the internet, but I don't need to explain the computer revolution to you. This little device that I coveted in the Christmases of 97 to 99, which I eventually got one that was an older model like this, was the mainstay of the 90s. Compaq Presario, HP, Hewlett-Packard computers, Gateway, and then later the iMac. This is where the internet started to thrive. And a lot of you don't remember these days. This was dial-up, AOL. And we weren't on our computers 24/7. We couldn't take them with us, so it was a treat when you could get on it. Stock market boom and bust. So as the internet grew, there was a frenzy like the 20s of buying stock. Investors were especially attracted to new .coms, conducting their internet via the business. Some notables that will come up will be Amazon in the mid-90s and later Google and Yahoo. NASDAQ stock exchange dominated this new thing and rose by 500%. However, by April 14th of 2000, the bubble will burst. Stocks suffered their largest one-day point drop up in that point in U.S. history. The economy slipped back into a recession. A lot of those .com companies went belly up, just kind of like the 1920s with the Great Depression and the stock market crash. Similar thing. The Enron syndrome, only after market dropped did it become apparent that the stock boom of the 90s had been fueled in part by fraud. Giant banks were deceiving schemes, profits were being lied about, robbing people of their retirements. There's just a lot of deregulation that occurred in the 90s. The fruits of deregulation, globalization, discontents 3. The boom of the 90s made deregulation unassailable. Most affected by the scandals were energy, telecoms, and stock trading. This all stemmed from Glass-Steagall Act, led to risk mortgages again and others misdeeds. Both Bush and Obama administrations felt they had no choice but to bail them out. So, though we get through the 90s pretty well, by the 2000s, the fruits of the 90s will come to be, and they're not always ripe or good. Rising inequality, you can see here, average real wages began to grow. Ground wealth of the richest Americans exploded. Computers continued to shift jobs overseas, and outsourcing of jobs to other countries will begin in earnest. So, the 90s is a great time to be alive, but obviously there's a lot of issues that occur. Next week I will do one more video lecture probably at once, and we'll talk about the culture wars, and then the impeachment and trial, and then the 9/11 events. and that will get us to chapter 28. Okay, I'll probably have one more lecture, like I said, next week. I covered a lot today. Have a great day.